And joining me down the line is Tim Maltin, one of the world's leading Titanic experts. Tim, let's go to you first. Obviously, this is exactly what we were hoping never to have to report. You tell me how surprised, how horrified, or really whether this is simply confirming your worst fears.
Well, it is. Obviously, we were all hoping for a miracle, but we did realize that we were needing a miracle to pull these people through this terrible situation. The fact they found debris now, if it is indeed debris from the submersible, the Titan, which we believe it is, experts believe it is, then it means that there was a catastrophic implosion. The only plus side I can see for that is instead of those brave people and also that 19-year-old young man having a slow and agonizing death, it would have been instantaneous, a quicker execution than a bullet. And I think in a way, if I had the choice, I'd choose the implosion.
All right, let me read you the very, very latest. This is being reported. Of course, we can't confirm it. It hasn't been corroborated. But the person who is revealing and divulging this information is somebody called David Mearns. David Mearns is friends with two of the passengers on board Titan. And he says he's part of a WhatsApp group which involves the Explorers Club. He's the person who told Sky News originally that the president of the Explorers Club, who's directly connected to the ships on the site, said that it was a landing frame and a rear cover from the submersible. David Mearns said, again, this is an unconventional submarine. That rear cover is the pointy end of it, and the landing frame is the little frame that seems to sit on it. He says this confirms that this is the submersible that we've been searching for. He says he knows both British billionaire Hamish Harding and the French sub-pilot Paul-Henri Nargeolet. There's even more information breaking now. David Mearns says this means that the sub suffered a crack and imploded, killing all 5 men on board instantly. He says a debris field implies there's a breakup of the submersible. And at that depth, because we know that they lost communications at around 3,300 metres. So that really indicates what the worst case scenario is, which is a catastrophic failure, an implosion. Then he says the only saving grace is that it would have been immediate, literally in milliseconds, and the men would have no idea what was happening. David Mearns, who is a friend of the 2 men on board, said this during an appearance this evening. He says, my worst fears have now been realised. Let me go to Tim first, then I'll go to Jacob, who's sitting here with me. Tim, you know, when you start having to say that it would have been a very swift death, you know that you're really confronting a real tragedy here. 5 people.
A terrible tragedy. And I've studied the Titanic all my life, and I never thought that she would take 5 more victims 111 years after she killed 1,500 people.
Yes, I mean, that's the most dramatic way, isn't it, to view this story, that the Titanic has taken even more lives. Jacob, obviously you're sitting here trying to make sense of this horrible story, really, isn't it? Because we think suddenly we see the faces of the 5 people there, and you know, this suddenly becomes very, very real. This is a story of, we think, instantaneous death for all 4 passengers and the pilot.
Yeah, this is news that you never really want to break in the line of work that we're in. We don't want to report people dying. But unfortunately, it seems that has happened, that there's been some form of catastrophic implosion, and as Tim said, and as we've all been saying, the only saving grace is that how quick it would have been. And before, I saw some information from a medical expert about this, saying that it would be before the people inside even registered it. So, yeah, we are clutching at straws to think of small mercies here, because it is ultimately a terrible, terrible tragedy.
It really is. And Tim, you know, it had been thought that maybe the fragments of the submersible may never be recovered because the area was so huge and the depth so great, and the difficulty of homing in on one very small vessel, just the size of a very small camper van, was considered that it might be insurmountable, and there would never be closure, and then there would never be this kind of information. And yet it does appear that now we do have it, Tim, doesn't it?
That's absolutely right. The one good thing is that if they can recover the parts, we can have a full black box investigation into exactly the structural failures, and that will educate us for future submarine development and indeed for regulation.
So I think we should say the names of the people who we think have been involved in this implosion and give them the due respect of saying their names. So the passengers are British businessman Hamish Harding. We've heard a great deal about him. Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his teenage son Suleiman. A French explorer Paul-Henri Nagier-Lay, and Stockton Rush, who's the CEO of OceanGate, which is the company that operates the submersible. So 5 individuals who set out on this incredible adventure of a lifetime. I mean, I'm here with Jacob Jaffa. I mean, it was a romantic kind of escapade. It was a kind of swashbuckling kind of Vasco da Gama, kind of Christopher Columbus type odyssey, wasn't it? And the most extraordinary thing, I think one of the most extraordinary things is it was all meant to be over in about 8 hours, wasn't it? It was meant to be a pretty deep, pretty swift and speedy excursion, to kind of like almost like a day trip.
Yeah, that's the way with these things. There is a sort of mythology around the Titanic, just the magnitude of what happened to it, the tragedy surrounding it, that does draw people in. And so, as you say, it was meant to be very short. And when they didn't re-emerge, that was actually when alarm bells started ringing. There have been questions over whether there was about an 8-hour window before the alarm was raised internationally, yes, even though they lost communication with this submersible. And so it's just kind of unfathomable what's happened and how it's turned out, and all this speculation has now seemingly become a lot more real.
And I wonder, Tim, whether what will happen now once the grieving has been done and the mourning has been done and people are coming to terms with this very personal, very real loss, 5 different families, you know, all struggling to come to terms with what has happened here. But I wonder whether this type of very expensive tourism into these enormously dangerous environments, such as going into space or going to the very, very depths of the ocean, whether that might suddenly be stopped, terminated, you know, whether there may be all sorts now of regulations and insurances and, you know, practices and red tape, is essentially bureaucracy to stop this kind of thing ever happening again.
I think there should be. Certainly where there are fee-paying passengers aboard who are non-specialists, it occurs to me that the subs which found the Titanic were Navy submarines from the French Navy and, of course, the US Navy. Also, Russian submersibles have dived on the Titanic. Again, these are Navy-owned vessels, whereas this was a commercial vessel. It was one of the first. It was a pioneering commercial type of tourist vessel. And it seems that they have not had frankly, the budget and the expenditure and the testing. They haven't been exposed to that. And I think we definitely need to make sure that any sub that's going down to these depths is fit for purpose and is safe.
And Jacob, obviously you're a journalist with The Sun. You've been covering this breaking story. It's been a story attracting enormous numbers of people to the newspaper. We've had, you know, huge numbers of people watching and listening to my programme right now on YouTube. People are fascinated. They're kind of held in thrall by this story. They wanted to know what the outcome's going to be. They've been praying for one answer. I think we're bringing them the answer that they dreaded. But have you had a feedback from Sun readers? Have they felt that this was wrong in its essence, that people shouldn't be able to pay other people to take them to places that are unfathomably dangerous?
There's been a split, really.
There's
been, as you say, it's commanded immense interest, and we look at the numbers upstairs and we see that people have been wanting to find out by the minute the latest stuff that's been going on with this.
I should just say for 1 second, sorry to interrupt you, that if you're watching this on screen, what you can actually see is the latest search footage unfolding. So that is what you can see now. This is footage that we haven't shown you before. It's just come to us and we're showing it to you the second we get it. We always do that here on TalkTV. The minute we get it, we share it with you. There it is. We don't spend time footling about with it and editing it and changing it. We just show you what we've got, and that's what we've got right now. So if you've tuned in to see the very latest, that is the very latest. And Jacob, you were just telling me that you know, some readers are divided on this. Some think it's fine to spend your money doing this.
Yes, some people have seen this very much as you know, why are people trying to do this? Why are they not, even though they are experienced, they are not trained experts, they are not military personnel, why are they trying to do this? But on the other hand, as we've seen with space exploration and now this sort of thing, there is only one direction that this stuff moves. It goes towards the commercial, towards the freely available, and as Tim indicated there, after tragedies like this, towards the regulated. And I think there is a portion of the readership as well who are looking at that and going, you know, if this helps inform us, if this gives us an example of what not to do, how to better regulate this industry, how to make it safe, and then ultimately at some point in the future, in a safe and controlled way, it becomes cheap and affordable for people to do, then that is only a good thing despite the immense tragedy.
Jacob, thank you very much indeed.